My guest this morning is Dr. Michael D. Dubose. He was raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. In 2004, he graduated from Delaware State University. The daughter that I'm talking about, that's where they graduated from. Delaware State University, Dover, Delaware, with a fine arts degree. In addition, he became a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. Wardell, you know, I have some Alpha brothers listening. Wardell, you know that was a mistake. Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. As an artist, he participated in various art exhibitions, contributed illustrations to Dorothy Dixon's book, Victoria's Blanket, and completed several large-sized murals for different businesses and organizations. In 2011, he began his educational career as a teacher, where he instructed the 4th grade and served as the lead teacher. 2 years later, he taught 5th grade and served as the cluster leader for grades 3, 4, and 5. During this teaching pathway, he attended St. Peter's University, located in Jersey City, New Jersey, and graduated with 2 master's degrees, educational leadership and school counseling. After 5 years of teaching, Michael transitioned into the role of school counselor, wherein he has school counseled at the elementary, middle, and secondary school levels. According to him, quote, being a school counselor was the most fulfilling role to date, unquote. Currently, Michael is in the Supervisor of Elementary School Counselors and Student Support Services, which he is responsible for supervising over 40 school counselors at 40 different schools in the New Jersey Public School District. In 2023, and this is most recent, he graduated with a Ph.D. in educational leadership at Caldwell University at Caldwell, New Jersey. Finally, congratulations, man, because I'll tell you all about that in a couple minutes. Finally, during his pastime, Michael enjoys visual and performing arts, reading and cooking, traveling, and being a quote-unquote, we got that in common too, plant dad. I'm a plant dad also. You come to my home, it's like, people say it's a forest.
It's
they
a
think
jungle.
It's like a jungle. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes, I'm a plant dad also. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Dr. Michael D. Dubose. Dr. Dubose, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Man, thank you for coming out. Now, see, I told you I was going to share with you in terms of when Dr. Dubose first joined the district, we met, and he came in and we started talking, and the first question he asked me was, when are you going for your doctorate? Oh, Frank, he's at my office, and he looked at me and said, when are you going for your doctorate? I said, man, I don't know. I don't think about that. He was already in the process of getting his.
Yes.
And so now he has actually earned and finished that. So congratulations,
yes,
Dr.
you.
Dubose.
Thank you.
And since that time he asked that question, I did start mine. I'm in the beginning stages of my doctoral work as well. But this brother is spirited. Like I said, we have a blast when we get together, teasing each other about fraternities, him being a Kappa, me being an Alpha. Every time he sees me, he let me know he can't stand that black and gold. Oh, here he come with that black and gold.
Here we go.
But
we love the Alphas.
So yeah, see, that's the same with the Kappas. We all tease each other, especially in the Divine Nine. I can't speak for the other ones, but I know in the Divine Nine we tease each other. But the truth be told, we all working together for the greater good.
Absolutely.
And many of our now listen. I'm generalizing, and as I always tell you all, I'm not white bashing. I'm not doing. That's not what I'm doing. But in many of our Caucasian fraternities, it stops at the college level. Like once you graduate, they pretty much, okay, they might wear the colors or whatever, but they really don't do anything. But in terms of the Divine Nine, we can be 90 and still in our various fraternities and still active because we give back.
Lifelong.
Right. There you go. It's lifelong, and it's about community service. It's about giving back. It's about pulling others up and so forth and so on. So it's a little bit different than just you pledged while you were in college and it ends once you graduate. With the Divine Nine, and for those of you who don't know what the Divine Nine is, I'm going to challenge you to look it up. The Divine Nine, again, is lifelong, like Dr. Dubose just said. So, okay, I tell you what, we're going to go back to somewhat from the beginning in terms of, did you want to go in education as a child, or how did you wind up in education? Because for me, I always wanted to go in and took a detour and came back. For you, was it like you always knew that you were going into education?
It's funny that you asked me that. My father was a teacher. He was a music teacher in the Jersey City Public Schools. And I'm very family orientated, and I listen to my elders. And my family on both sides had educational backgrounds, my mom's side and my father's side. And when I saw just the overall influences that they had onto the community, especially with my father firsthand, because he worked at the school that I attended. It was easy to see that he was making a difference, and he truly enjoyed his life and working with the students and working with teachers. But my father was phenomenal in the sense that he was able to start things that was trend-setting. For example, he had the first elementary jazz band. So I'm talking about, we're playing Birdland. Okay, so I'm in the 6th grade playing Birdland and playing the saxophone. But going to your question, I didn't know it right away. I just knew that I enjoyed mimicking my teachers. So what I would do, I would take my father's grade books or lesson plan books and pretend I was a teacher as a kid because I was the only child, had nothing to do, but not knowing that that would, cement my desire to be a teacher.
That makes total sense. For preachers, they call their kids PKs. So you were like a TK.
Yes, I was a TK.
And you were in your father's school.
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay. So did the kids
still getting in trouble?
Did the kids tease you about that?
Yeah and no. I find that helped to kind of like minimize some sense of bullying, even though I did experience that as a kid. My father couldn't protect me from everything, but it's just the idea that because he was there, I had that extra support that perhaps other kids didn't have. And I had teachers looking out for me because of their relationships with my father, and not to minimize my mom's influence, because certainly she did have enormous influence on my life. My mom was an administrator at the time called Jersey City State College, and then it changed to New Jersey State University. And my mom was a big proponent of education, and not just going to school to go to school, but doing excellent, student performance, ensuring that I'm reading, ensuring that, you're not going to get C's in the major contents. My mom would put me on punishment real quick. You want to fool around? This is what's going to happen. So that definitely allowed me to understand the essence of education and staying committed towards my goals. My mom always told me I was going to be a leader. I never knew what that was, but she certainly taught me that when you're committed to something, you stick with it. And you stick with it with a sense of, like what you was talking about earlier, positive words, positive mindset, and also looking at how the previous generation did before you and seeing if you can go beyond that. So that was always my goal. The descending generation always had to do better than the ascending generation. And so that stuck with me. And that's why I pursued the accomplishments that I did.
Well, you know what? Bravo. And hats off, hands down, hand clap for your parents and for you taking their guidance. Now, there's a lot that Dr. Dubose just said there to unpack in terms of, one, his parents were in education. His dad was a teacher. You said Birdland. And when I was in the jazz band, because I play keyboards, when I was in the jazz band at Eastside High School, we played Birdland. I remember it well. Matter of fact, I can still play Birdland today. But in terms of the seriousness of this, your dad was an African-American male teacher. Mm-hmm. When I tell the listening audience, first off, it's hard to find teachers, period, now. Right. But when you start getting into like trying to hone in on getting black male teachers, it's near impossible.
Absolutely.
So the fact that your dad was one during that time frame says and speaks volumes. The fact that you wanted to go into it and your mom was an administrator and everything that you said that they were telling you was absolutely right. As a matter of fact, when you work in an urban district with predominantly boys and girls of color, kids of color, of brown and black kids or whatever, the message that Mike just said about excellence, that's the message that has to be drilled, that you have to be excellent. Mm-hmm.
And going beyond your 100%, that's what was embedded into me. You're not giving 100%, 150%, because you are a dark-skinned black male in a white society that will be quick to judge you.
And see, this is the thing. The judgment is one thing. The fulfilling of what the judgment is another. So it's one thing for somebody to see you that way and you're not really that way and you can prove that you're not. It's another thing to sit there and give the ammunition to say, see, I told you so. So the fact that you're a dark-skinned male, now if you go out there and act hood, ghetto, stealing, thugging, and this, that, and the other, well, that's the expectation. That's the judgment. That's the prejudge. But if the judgment is not to expect that you're going to wind up getting a doctorate.
We could talk about that. We definitely could talk about that. My grandmother, I think she was more so responsible for that without even realizing it. And it was my mother's mother. And I remember distinctly, I might have been like 8 or 9 years old, and she's asking me what did I want to be. And I told her I wanted to be a doctor, but I just never knew that what kind of doctor I was going to be or that it could actually come true. So after graduating from college with a fine arts degree, I was like, that's a dream that's not going to happen. But, you know, it's that idea of thinking positively and planning your future. And in my 20s, I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't follow the route that my mother and my father intended for me to follow because I wanted to be an artist. And my mom asked me, go back to school, get your master's. I did go back to school and try to get my master's the first time because it was not the first time it was successful. No, it was a couple of attempts. And the first time it was bad. You know, I didn't make the grades I was making in my undergraduates. And in fact, I think I flunked out because of the fact that I wasn't inspired. But it was the idea that I was more dedicated towards painting and drawing and painting things that were that I was seeing and feeling. And I think that helped me to overcome a lot of mental health, like what we're going to discuss later on. But it's the idea that when I was doing these things, I didn't foresee me becoming a doctor or even a teacher at that point. I was working in customer service, and not knowing that those little jobs, those nuances would later have influence on my job now.
There's no such thing as a wasted experience.
No, it's not.
It really is not. And it's interesting of what I'm hearing you say, because first off, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be an artist. But I can relate to your story, and I just shared this story Thursday night as well. My original intent whenever I graduated high school was to major in either music or English. My dad was like, nope. You're not, because you're not going to make any money doing that. And I respected my father, so I chose business administration as undergrad. That's what, and struggled with it, because it was like that. Like you just said, one of my passion. Now, for me, it was the flip of you in terms of the master's. When I got to the master's program, it was in communication. That was my passion. When I got to the education master's, that was my passion. Those two, I mean, it was like almost 4.0. It was undergrad that was the struggle because it was not my passion. I'm saying all that to say was your true desire was to go be an artist, just like mine was to be a musician or either English.
Medley, I wasn't making any money. I wasn't making any money. And if you want to be an artist, it costs. And
see, that was my dad's point.
Right. The supplies are expensive. Trying to do an art show to advertise yourself is expensive. So I'm just focusing on trying to make money through being an artist, not knowing the plan that I needed to make. So, like, during my 20s, again, I made those mistakes, but they were teachable moments for me to learn from.
Yes.
So in my 30s, I was able to kind of like develop this structure of what I needed my 30s to be. And it was not going to be consisting of fun. It was going to be consisting of making up for lost time.
Right.
That I felt, because I'm very hard on myself. And I just wanted to be proud of myself. And at the time, with me just being an artist, I was not proud of myself. You know, because I wanted to achieve more. I was seeing my friends, and a lot of times people say, don't compare yourself to other people, but I was seeing my friends, they were actually having careers. They were getting apartments and being able to pay the rent. I had an apartment, could barely pay the rent because the money wasn't coming in.
You were literally what they call the starving artist.
Starving.
And see, and that's where...
You see how skinny I am.
And see, that's where my dad was taking, because he told me straight up, look, if you go into the music thing, you're going to have to be big like Michael Jackson to make money. Or if you major in English, the only thing you're going to be able to do is teach. Now, I took really like only be able to, but for the most part, I understood what you were saying. And I wound up going, that's what I'm saying, in terms of a detour, I wound up going into corporate for 15 years before I came back to education. However, but going back to what we were saying, this is, folks, listening artists, this is where the beauty of this thing is. You're listening to two African-American males who have gotten to the upper echelons of where, like he said, a society who don't believe we can get there. And we're working with kids who we are trying to help them understand, yes, you can. If we can get there, you can get there.
Absolutely.
And that's the constant message and the role modeling, because, see, our kids are having the opportunity to see us. When Dr. Dubose comes in my building, my boys get a chance to see him.
Yes.
They see me. Whenever he's going around to all these 40 schools and 40 counselors that he's supervising, they get a chance to see him.
Yes.
All right? They see people who look like him. Matter of fact, I got to have you come talk to the boys. I got to have you come be a guest speaker to help the boys understand what your career is. Matter of fact, some of the stuff that we're talking about, you can talk about.
I would love
with
to.
the boys. And he went to Del State. Man, I know that
Party
campus.
school.
See, that's where my two daughters went. Both of them. I know that campus. I've been down to that campus. I've stayed down there. I've slept on the floor in the dorm.
And I graduated with honors, but I partied with the best of them. So that was the economist lifestyle I was living. Studying at night and partying right afterwards, trying to get to class.
I know the Del State campus. Yes. Like I said, both of my girls went there. So, all right, down at Del State, the place to be. So now, I see you, but you did actually have illustrations in a book, in Victoria's Blank and all that. So
it's not that I wasn't. I don't like to use the word successful, because successful or success is, I think, an individualistic terminology. You know, it's customary, but I would like to say I'm accomplished, because I had a goal. And the goal is complete, right? So people love my art, and I don't produce trash. I take my time to produce things that are worthy, that are thought-provoking, that get people talking, and then we move on and go home. But I enjoyed making those illustrations for Dorothy Dixon's book, Victoria's Blanket, because the message of the overall text was really positive. Some of my art that I've done afterwards have been hung throughout New York, Woodstock, New York, New Jersey, Delaware. I've sung for the mayor because I also sing. Okay. You know, that's the artist, the performing side of my father, and the artistic side comes to my mom. So it's kind of like I have the best of both worlds. But see, again, I thought that I was only going to be a visual and performing artist. I never saw the left-brained aspect of myself until, again, I became a teacher. When I became a teacher, I promise you, the first thing I did was I enrolled myself into a graduate program, and I made that promise to myself that I was going to take my education seriously, unlike the first couple of attempts.
Well, like I said, for me, it was flip. I mean, my first time through the first time I ever received an F in my life was in accounting. That was in my undergrad. I had never received an F on anything ever, but I failed my accounting class in undergrad, and didn't have any more Fs after that. But no, I didn't. That's not true. There was a couple more. I think money and banking. I think I failed that first time through. Maybe I think I'm gonna fail that too.
If you saw my bank account, it's in the negative.
But it's interesting. You just talked about becoming a teacher. What, you know, as you taught, and then you decided to be a guidance counselor. Why, and how was that transition?
I was a substitute for the longest time, and I had a lot of years of subbing. I subbed right after college, and it was an experience that was very rewarding, but the children's behavior was changing. I noticed a shift, and I don't think I was ready for that. After getting passing the praxis and then eventually finding a job, it was very intimidating, but I will thank this lady, Mona Lisa Kalina, for hiring me as a fourth grade teacher and then believing in me. I remember, and I have to also thank Valerie Slack. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I was hanging out with one of my friends, and at the time I had just lost one of my jobs, and I was like, I need to find a job. And my friend who was a teacher, he was like, well, why don't you try to become a teacher? You already had passed the praxis, just try. And we started looking up places that were looking for teachers, and I found this ad for Dr. Lena Edwards Academic Charter School, and I called, and a lady by the name of Valerie Slack, she picked up the phone and she said, are you going to apply for the job? Because, you know, we may be looking, but it's nothing guaranteed. And she was like, just submit your resume. I was like, okay, whatever. So when she said it like that, I wasn't really convinced or motivated to do so. So I just like, whatever. the next day, this lady calls me. She was like, I thought you was going to submit your resume. And I was like, okay. I submitted it. And then a few hours later, I got an interview. And I was so shocked. Like, I was like, wow, I have my first teaching interview. And then they explained what it was going to consist of, where I had to do a classroom demonstration. Boy, oh boy, I was intimidated. At this point, I was out the classroom for at least a good 4 years. I didn't, I was very nervous. But I remember going to the school because they needed me to sign my application. And so then after I signed the application, and I looked, very, very casual. They're like, we're going to do your interview now. And I'm like, there's no way you can do my interview like this. I have on slacks. I have on like this shirt that was just not appropriate. Like, no, my parents would kill me. My parents were very, I'm not going to say we were the Cosbys. It was not like that, but I was somewhat privileged. My parents were middle class individuals, but they had high expectations and standards of me. And I just knew if I would be seen the way that I was interviewing, my mother would have a fit, my father would have a fit. Yep. And Miss Slack was like, you'll be fine. So I interviewed, and then I was called back for a second interview for my demonstration in Medley. When I tell you I was nervous, I was shaking. I entered into this classroom. It was a fourth grade classroom. And the school at the time was a former Catholic school. So their chalkboards and this overall environment was not the most, it wasn't well developed. Like it needs some work, like a lot of schools. So I'm writing on a board. And as I'm writing, there's nothing coming on the board. So now I'm even more nervous, and my chalk is breaking at the same time too. And so then I had to be innovative and re-teach or find differentiation. Right. There it is, right? Right. In order to get my point across. And then what made things worse was they were laughing at me in the background, my interviewers. So I was feeling definitely nervous at that point. But the overall point was they liked me because I still tried, and I made a point of giving my best. And because of that, I got the job.
Well, again, that's... You never know until. And I agree with you in terms of being presentable and your concern for that. There's no question you're going to have that.
Right, because people judge you.
That's right. And you never know.
First impressions are everlasting impressions.
That's exactly right. But it worked out that you did get it. And you're right in terms of children changing over the years. And so, because you're not the first person I know that went from teaching to guidance. Matter of fact, a couple of your guidance counselors now went that route. They went from either teaching to guidance or either some other position within the district to guidance. What was that transition like for you?
That was a different type of transition because after I got my master's, I knew right away I thought I would be more effective as a school counselor than the classroom because I was burnt out. That is a real circumstance. Schools have a lot of expectations and demands on teachers, and I wasn't really interested in fulfilling those anymore. So when I had the opportunity to become the school counselor, it was because one of the school counselors just had left school, and upon leaving and finding out, I was like, you know what? Let me speak to the principal, see what's good. Let me try to jump on this. But again, I was new to the school counseling field. I was like, they're not going to take me seriously. But what I learned is that African American males, they're a dime in a dozen when it comes to school counseling.
Really?
So there's not many.
Oh, no, okay, not many, okay.
There's not many.
I thought you were saying it just the reverse.
I'm sorry. It's not many.
Oh, okay.
It's very few of us. And because of that, I was more of a commodity.
Yes.
And, I don't like to look at it like that, but that's sad because of the lack of representation. But when I applied to different jobs, it was easier for me to get it than a white male counterpart. because it's so
No,
many
we were
of
in.
them.
It was. A matter of fact, we're in demand, just like right now. Which I mean, it's like when a black male comes and wants to teach. You're right.
Right.
So I can
Special
only
education,
imagine. Right.
science, math.
Exactly. So I can only imagine. I would think the guidance department has even fewer black males than teaching.
I believe so.
Yeah. I can't.
It would have to be.
Right, because less men want, historically, men, excuse me, historically, men generally did not go into education and teaching because of the pay.
Right.
When education first started, it actually was designed more for the female.
Exactly.
To be the teacher. And from the pay structure, it was kind of like the male brought home the bacon and the teaching job was kind of like a secondary income. So if you look historically, that's why you would not see a lot of males in education to begin with. Then, like I said, when you start whittling it down by race,
right,
it really gets, the numbers really get tiny. And then by position, that's what I'm saying. When you get now into guidance,
right,
them numbers are going to be minuscule.
Right. It's minute.
So the fact that you applied, oh, yes. They were like, yes, I'm quite sure they snapped you up.
Man, I could go to perhaps any district and perhaps and get the job, but it's not because solely I'm black. It's
you had to be qualified too.
Exactly.
Now.
It has to be intellect too.
That's exactly right.
I've been on interviews where they already told me up front, we already selected the person, but we'll hear what you have to say. And I turned that interview around and it became mine.
There you go.
Because I knew what to say and I knew how to market myself to let them know what type of school counselor you're about to get.
Right.
Because I'm an investment. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. And first thing first, I'm here for the kids.
Yes.
It's about advocating for the kids and also the families, letting them know that you're a team player. So when I got into the field of school counseling, I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the lives of both the student as well as the family. And then it became the school because I saw school-wide programming as a gold mine.
Right.
Where I could develop my own programs. I can develop social-emotional programming, helping kids to apply to different schools or academic programs or summer programs, getting parents involved. That parental engagement piece is really huge.
No question. And see, again, as an administrator, this is the thing in schools. And I always talk in sports terms to the kids and to the staff for that matter, in terms of like using a sports analogy in terms of how the hierarchy or the org chart is. So you have the principal, which of course would be the head coach. Then you have all the other ancillary support operations. Guidance is one of them. There, if you want to use the sports analogy, you have the head coach and the assistant coaches, this, that, and the other. Okay. I cannot tell you the value of a good guidance counselor because on my career, I've only had one that was really horrid. Most of my guidance counselors were very good, and the ones that I have now are excellent. I have two that I have, and both of them are African-American. I have an African-American male and an African-American female. I've had Caucasian counselors as well that were just as good. Like I said, throughout my 24 years in education, 17 or 18 as a principal, I've really only had one that was horrid. But the rest of them are very good. And my point in saying that Michael and I are getting a chuckle out of it, my point in saying is you cannot underestimate the value of a guidance counselor because that's who the kids go to talk to when they're struggling. You guide them in terms of their high school choices. If you're in the middle school, you're helping guide them in terms of helping them understand what high schools they want to go to, what jobs they think they might want to do when they grow up. And again, we're going to talk, so I've worked my way up to where we get ready to talk about with the restorative practices and social emotional learning and restorative justice and so forth. I've worked my way up to that, giving you Dr. Dubose's background as we get there. But again, I cannot tell you as a principal. He knows that my guidance counselors, I tell them all the time, they're like my right hand. I don't have a vice principal in my school.
Right.
And I press my guidance counselors into service. They act as if my VPs or what have you, and they really do a yeoman's job. So we're here, listening audience, Dr. Dubose is in the studio with me, so if you hear something that we're talking about that you want to call in, you can because he's live.
Please call in.
973-720-2738.
Ask these questions.
That's right. Ask your questions because, and again, I said it last week when Nasim was here. I don't get offended if the phone doesn't light up because I listen to podcasts and radio shows that I don't call in. So I get it. Some of you are nervous, but don't be.
Don't be.
We're friends. We're family. Yes. If you hear something, you have a question, call it in 973-720-2738. You can also text it to that same number, 973-720-2738. You can text it and I'll see it and I'll ask it to Dr. Dubose. But for those of you who have children, and maybe if you don't, you've probably heard the next terms we're going to talk about, which is restorative practice, restorative justice, social emotional learning. You might have heard of it at SEL. In education, things come and go as buzzwords and buzz concepts or what have you. So over the last few years, these particular topics that we're going to be talking about, they're like the hot buttons in education, and they are needed.
Severely.
As a matter of fact, you did the doctorate on restorative practices, correct?
Yes, my doctoral study was on the influence of restorative practices on stakeholders' experiences, school climate, culture, and HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And basically what I wanted to understand was to examine what the influences of restorative practices would be in the school, as well as on school climate. Will it make a difference on the rate of bullying that we're finding in schools? And, the study did show that parental involvement is needed in order to help to minimize those circumstances.
So before we can go down the road, let's help the listening audience understand what restorative practice and restorative justice and social emotion, what is all that about? Because if you look at restorative practices and restorative justice, the word restore is in there. That means when something is damaged or something is broken, you want to put it back together. It may not necessarily be the way it was, but you want everybody to be whole.
Right.
You want everybody to walk away from that meeting, whatever was damaged, relationship was damaged, trust was damaged, whatever was damaged. By the time you finish these strategies and tactics, when you walk away from that meeting, you want everybody to be whole.
Absolutely. So restorative practices is basically a approach that schools may use to talk problems out with community members in support of the child. So, for example, if a child has been bullied, a restorative approach may be restorative statements or restorative questioning or impromptu meetings or restorative circles or restorative conferences. And the whole idea is for people to sit down to support the child to understand how their behavior may have influenced or impacted someone else and caused harm to a relationship. So going back to your point with the breakdown of restorative, you want to restore a damaged relationships through the use of community. And indigenous tribes, civilizations have been using this philosophy for the longest, and we just adopted it and modernized it, but it's been around for a long time. And furthermore, I just wanted to make this point as well. Restorative practices is not exclusive to the school. It could be used outside of the school. It could be used at home as a child rearing technique, as well as the office. There's always problems going on. We have microaggressions. We have, cultural competencies. And when you're trying to dig deep into those realms, restorative circles can help to flesh out those concerns.
No, Dr. Dubose is absolutely right in terms of, while we are using it in the school environment, you can use it in the home, because one of the techniques is having like a talking piece wherein and I've tried it. I think you can even use this husband-wife. But in terms of you give someone an artifact or something that you each hold, and the time that you're holding the artifact is your time to speak. The other person cannot speak while you're holding the artifact. Now, they're going to have their opportunity to speak because the artifact is going to be passed to them, and they can say whatever's on their heart or on their mind, and now the other person cannot talk. It gives folks an opportunity to express their thoughts without being interrupted. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, a trigger or a pet peeve is to be cut off. You want to set me off is let me be trying to get my point across, and you just keep cutting in and cutting me off. While I've allowed you to express and now you don't allow me to express. So one of the strategies, like I said, is having the talk piece, where if you're holding the talk piece, you talk and the other person's quiet. And when that person gets the talk piece, they talk and now the other person is quiet. But that's just one technique. And as Dr. Dubose said, it's about community. It's about putting everybody together to help bring back or restore.
And can I just say something else,
yes,
too? You
please.
know, when we're talking about communication, we have to also look at the dynamics of communication. You have the speaker, and then you have the listener. And people don't realize that the power in communication really falls with the listener. The listener is the more powerful or more impregnable individual within that dynamic, because the speaker can always make a fool of themselves.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And then extending the notion of restorative practices, especially as it relates to societal norms, think of punitive models, exclusionary models like zero tolerance. You know, in schools, in order to confront student behaviors, misbehavior, schools utilize something called zero tolerance, which may comprise of detention, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, expulsion, ultimately leading to the school-to-prison pipeline that so many people don't talk about, especially in schools. And what happens as we engage and we utilize these methodologies, unfortunately, it's minority students, African Americans, Latinos.
Correct.
Disabled students who are targets for these ZTP policies, for these exclusionary methods. And you're removing the child out of the building or out of the learning environment with the expectation that the culture, the climate is going to improve because they're no longer there, but you're doing a disservice to them and their families and mitigating the degree of trust that the school and the family may have towards one another. And unfortunately, and you know this as a building principal, that ZTP is typically administered by the principal. So there is no inclusionary type of process where the families are involved to helping to make these decisions about their child. And as we all know, as a community, the family knows the child best. Who's watching these kids when they are suspended?
No, you're absolutely. Now, there's a lot. This is another one of those areas where there's a lot to unpack, because there's a lot of dynamics going on here in terms of, and we're using the school setting, but Michael just said something in terms of school to prison pipeline. And see, we were talking about mindset earlier.
Yes.
This is what begins to happen, particularly like he said, in the urban areas or in our, the non-dominant groups. Child does something, suspension. Like he said, you remove it. I just had this conversation with my students the other day about removed from society. All right. So we're starting a pattern at a young age of the expectation is that every time I do something wrong, now, because this is where the dynamics get crazy. It's like every time I do something wrong, I'm going to be removed from society, when it doesn't necessarily have to go there at that point. The pushback that we always get on this, and I cannot tell you how many time teachers will say, well, you send him down to Mr. Medley and he don't do nothing. The conversation, the fact that we had the conversation and the talk, that was the something. People think restorative practice is soft. They think that's soft.
It lacks accountability.
Right. That's what, and that's the prevailing thought, that it lacks accountability. That's not true, because in many instances, when you have to pull a whole community of folks together and you got to get folks talking, to be honest with you, that's harder than me writing a suspension. It's easy to write a suspension. And
right.
I've had the highest suspension rate in the district a few years, depending on which school I was serving. There was a couple of times I had the highest suspension rate in Patterson Public School District, depending on which school I was serving. It does nothing. I've had children get suspended and come back and do the exact same thing they were suspended for. The day they came back.
That's a form of recidivism. But luckily for us, we both know that there are some instances, there are some inclinations demonstrated by the student where zero tolerance is needed.
See, that's what I'm saying. You have to know when, but it can't be just to the extreme. Like
right.
Everything is because this is the other thing that we're combating, and this is going back to the community thing. Because most of our children have been indoctrinated with, if somebody hits you, hit them back. Mm-hmm. So it is a rough sledding, a rough sell to help a child understand, especially in the school. if someone bothers you or hits you, I know the natural response is to hit back. However, don't do it, because we have the adults here in the building to handle it for you. That is our jobs, is to handle it. Do not take matters into your own hands. It's a tough sell because they have been indoctrinated with that. If somebody hits you, hit them back.
And parents can be brought on to the whole ideology of restorative practices with the use of what I like to call, and you guys can use this term, I won't sue you if you use it, white glove services.
Right.
Because when you're able to provide excellent customer service and express yourself to other stakeholders, families, communities about the operations of the school and what the expectations are, they will be able to follow suit. But it's all in your approach. If you approach it and you provide them with a clear articulation of what the expectations are, let them know what the rules are, what the consequences are for each offense, they will follow suit. But it's all in your approach. And like Medley indicated earlier, everything does not have to be zero tolerance, because we cannot use the one-size-fits-all approach. And in fact, zero tolerance derived from, well, allegedly, because there are some studies that debunk this, but zero tolerance allegedly derived from the broken windows theory, which states that when you leave something broken or something damaged as is, it shows to others that no one cares about it. And what that can look like in translation to behavior in the classroom is a teacher ignoring behaviors until it becomes out of control, and that's when they want to do something about it. What are we doing? What are we saying? And the fact of the matter is, again, in order to improve behavior, in order to support students for their performance, you need to have the family on board. If you have hard-to-reach families, find a way to reach out to them. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak to New Jersey School Counselor Association, and that's what I was speaking about. How to reach those hard-to-reach families, because everybody has a part in this. This is not an Allen. This is not just my job. So, I like to utilize pronouns like we, or words like collaboratively. We can make things happen for your child. But when it's pointing a finger and saying you, or I, what type of message are we sending to the child in regards to camaraderie or working together as a team? Because the whole point is the school is a house. It is a beacon of learning. It's an institution of education where we all have a responsibility, which should be shared. Shared responsibility, shared decision-making when it comes down to student excellence.
We have two questions that were text in.
One
is, going back to your teaching whenever you felt burnt out, it says, "Sir, how did you address your feelings of being burnt out? I also experienced aspects of being burnt out while working in a teen group home. I had to step away."
Let me tell you something. I had the opportunity to hear total praise. I had the opportunity of opening a book called the Bible. God is amazing. And if you sit down and just pray, and even if you're not a believer, have time to consider who you are and look at the challenges that you've overcame before and find ways to find that energy. Because if you have a passion, you should never be burned out from it. Nothing in this world, no force in this world should barricade you from reaching your highest point. And some of the ways that I was able to overcome the burnout is through art, singing, writing, doing some self-reflection, taking some R&R, taking some days off from work. Believe it or not, teachers need to take days off. School counselors need to take days off because they are always the first to address an issue. You got to do this by the principal. You got to do that by the principal. You got to do this for the teacher. You got to do that for the teacher. Section 504, intervention and referral services. Child study team needs you to be on the team for IEPs. You're always being the first one to manage crisis. So taking time to love yourself. Self-love is so important. When I was doing my dissertation, man, talk about burnout, I was in a bad place. But I had to reach my God, my source, look at my core and see who I was as an individual, because that was a rough period of my life.
I can believe it, because I'm just starting. As a matter of fact, the classwork is not, it's the dissertation piece, trying to form that up in the right way. This, well, trying to come up with a focus, trying to do your research, so I can understand that. The second question that I have from another listener is, as the guidance counselor, we were talking about, how you have to work with kids on so many different areas. This one is talking about in terms of their career choices or trying to help them figure out what they're good at. A lot of times kids they don't know what they're good at. They don't know what they want to be. And yet they have somebody like the guidance counselor that they can talk to. So how do you guide somebody into a possible career choice or what they think they want to be?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the things that I like to do is give students a realistic optic about life. Okay. And what did that mean? That means going through all of the possible potential charges that you will have: rent, car notes, insurance, and putting that in a realistic way where people can quantify the cost or the number of responsibilities that you have. And then also talking about the state that you live in. We are in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of the wealthiest states, but it's one of the more expensive states. We have the highest property tax. So when I have a student talking to me that they want to be a physical therapist or massage therapist, realistically, is that going to get you to be able to pay your rent, 1 bedroom, $1,800? Okay. How much is a massage therapist bringing home? Let's look at that. So what we do, we go online, we go on career.net or .org and see what is the average salary in New Jersey. Can this support you to pay your rent? And a lot of times you only can just pay your rent. How about gas?
Right. You can't do anything else. Your rent is it. That's right.
Because I'm gonna tell you this. I likes to eat. I like my lobster. I like my shrimp. I like my scallops. So if I can't get that, that's not the career choice for me. So when I'm having these conversations with these kids, my babies, our students, our future, I want them to have a realistic lens so that they can understand the cost of life. It's not cheap. And a lot of times kids don't have an understanding of financial literacy. And I think that we at the school need to do a better job with that.
No, he's absolutely right. And I saw something crazy yesterday. I'm at the salon getting my monthly pedicure, and I'm looking up there at the news screen up there, and it had a reporter, because they had the sound down. You could just see the optics, and it had medium rent, and this was in New York, and obviously in Manhattan. It was like $4,356, something crazy like that. That was the median. The median rent in New York City was like
for me and you?
No, it's not. I couldn't mine either. That's exactly what I was like. I looked at that and went cross-eyed. $4,300. That was the median. That wasn't the average. That was the median. So that's the midpoint.
Right.
$4,300 rent in New York City. And, I was sitting there like, oh, my God. But to Dr. Dubose's point, whenever you start looking at what it is you want to be when you grow up, you really have to look to see, is it going to support your, first off, just being able to live, not even getting into the lobster and just being able to live with the rent. And like he said, if you want a car, you got car insurance and you got the gas. And if it break down with the maintenance and you got to eat, you got your food, you got utilities. So when you start helping a child, and he's right, we don't do the best. We're getting better, because that is a part of the guidance curriculum in terms of financial literacy. That is in there now. And we're getting better at it. But we really historically have not done a good job in helping kids understand financial literacy and budgeting and so forth and so on.
But it needs to be spread across the scope of the curriculum. This is true. It should not just be the school counselor's responsibility to teach financial literacy, social studies, math, reading. Those type of classes need to be interdisciplinary with those type of content, so that students can have a stronger embedded knowledge and skill set when it comes to saving or spending. Because it will help you. It's a lifelong
It's a
skill.
lifelong. And, I'm glad you brought it up, because for the most part, when I tell you I've had good guidance counselors, that's what they've helped our kids understand, is not just a skill for that particular grade level or for that time in school. They teach lifelong skills.
Yes.
They're teaching lifelong skill that you're going to need for the rest of your days after you graduate, so forth and so on. So he's absolutely right on that. There was something I wanted to go back to that you said a couple of minutes ago, and it'll come back to me. But again, I know what it was. In terms of social emotional learning. Now, we talked about a little bit about restorative practice. I know what it was. It just came back to me too. In terms of when you were talking about restorative practices in community, you have the opportunity there to educate the family, because I told you in terms of the indoctrination is if somebody hit you, you better hit them back. When you have these or use these restorative techniques and you get the entire community there, you get an opportunity to educate. You try to help the parents understand, we get it, but let me help you understand this is why that's not the best directive to give your child, especially in the world we live in now. Because in the world we live in now, that could cost your child his or her life. The whole notion of if somebody hit you, hit them back. You got to get your hit back. I've literally had kids come to me. I was like, why'd you do that? I had to get my hit back. Well, did it make you feel any better? No. Okay, but you had to get your hit back. One of the questions I ask when kids do something to each other, I say, would you want somebody to do that to you? No. Then why did you do it to somebody else? Now, you sat here and told me you wouldn't want somebody to do it to you, but you had no problem doing it to somebody else.
But Medley, you're not less than a person, or you're not weak if you say, you know what? I need to have a conversation with a trusted adult to let them know that I was just assaulted, because now I need to express what this assault has done to me.
Correct. What's really fun, and even when I'm interviewing kids to come into school, because one of the interview questions has to do with conflict resolution, and the parent would be sitting there, and I would tell the child, I said, listen, let me tell you something. If you came in my office and say, Mr. Medley, such and such just did something to me, now you listen to me, I want to tighten them up, I do, but I won't, because I'm here in the building. When that child did that to me, I felt this, that, and the other. And I said, that's fair. If you come to me, Mr. Medley, I want to do it, but I'm not. I'm going to abide by your expectations. I said, that's fair. I said, I can understand it. I would rather for you to come in and tell me that than to pretend like you didn't.
But Medley, going back to your point that you made earlier in your commentary with the accountability piece, the same example that I was just talking about, a child being assaulted by another child, if a restorative circle or impromptu meeting is being facilitated, what happens, the accountability piece is both students have to face one another.
Yes.
And now you have to hear active listening, which is the key component to restorative practices. Now you have to hear how your behaviors has impacted another child in a negative way.
That is correct.
And now you have to swallow that.
That is correct.
So nobody wants to face their demon. No one wants to look in the mirror. I love Michael Jackson's song "Man in the Mirror" because it starts with self.
I know that's right.
So when you can reflect, you know what I mean, and see how your behaviors has impacted somebody else based upon conversation, that can be much harsher than spending 2 or 3 days at home.
I could not agree with you more.
PlayStation.
Right, okay? I could not agree with
Mom
you more.
Mom and Dad are at work, and I'm at home playing PlayStation, not doing no homework, isolated from my my friends and the learning environment. You know what I'm saying?
I could not agree with you more. And he's absolutely right. For you to have to sit there and both sides get a chance to sell what they felt, but the fact that you have to go through that process, yes, it is tough. That's why I said earlier, it's tougher to do that than to take the suspension. It's tougher for me to have to sit there and facilitate that than for me to, okay, you know what, it's easy for me to write a suspension. All I got to do is sign my name. How many days they get? 3. Put my name on it. Give it to the secretary. She gives it to the assistant superintendent in central office. The kid's gone for 3 days. That's easy. But to sit there and, like he said, each one, for lack of a better phrase, have to kind of talk their sins, that's tough. Because I've seen kids sit there and struggle with having to say how they felt and, you know, how that made me feel. And then that other kid had to sit there and look at that kid and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was making them feel that way.
And, let me just say this, too. As a teenager in middle school and high school, I did not make the most wisest choices. I did not know how to communicate or interact with people in a very positive way. Had I been introduced to restorative practices perhaps I would have been able to employ pro-social skills and conflict resolution skills better to resolve friendships. Because some kids, excuse me, it's not about keeping the relationship, it's about winning the war. So when you're talking, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to win the war, or are you trying to save the relationship? And I think that when you are a parent or a teacher, that is a tool that you're trying to teach and emphasize, because we want to save relationships. We can't walk in this world alone thinking that we're macho and we're powerful and no one's going to tell us what to do, or I can hit whoever I want to hit. It doesn't work like that.
And it doesn't. And see, you heard me say earlier about, I'm a firm believer that COVID exacerbated mental health issues. There are things that went on in folks' childhoods that they kept inside of them, that they internalized. Mm-hmm. They may have been in school and somebody did these things and they never shared with anybody. My guest a couple of weeks ago talked about how she was raped or molested at 8 years old and how that impacted the rest of her days. When you experience these things in school or at home as a child and you internalize them and don't talk to somebody or don't talk it out, it has the potential now for exploding in later years. And now you have projected something onto someone else, or you heard me talking about the pilot that crashes his plane into the side of a mountain and kills everybody. Now that's where these things begin. They exhibit themselves later. So the point that Dr. Dubose and I are making this morning is, as children and as we work with children, we got to get them to get that stuff out when it happens.
Right. Because people are like volcanoes. You can explode. Okay? You can explode. And that's part of the humanistic behaviors. Nonetheless, we have to learn how to manage that explosion. We have to we have to practice self-control. And it's not enough to say, practice self-control, practice self-control. You have to teach and explain, articulate very clearly what it looks like, feels like, and sounds like when you're practicing.
That is correct. That is correct. Now, before we get ready to go, because we talked restorative, but I want to talk a little bit about social, and it connects. Parents, loved ones, guardians, you may have heard your child, or you may have received flyers or whatever that had the letters SEL on there. Or you may have heard the word social emotional learning. We're going to help you understand a little bit about what that is. So when we talk social emotional learning, explain to the listening audience what that is.
Oh, man, that is a component that involves building relationships, awareness of self, being able to recognize nonverbal and verbal cues. It's a wide range of different domains, but it is a teachable moment to build lifelong skills again for those individuals to be able to channel negative energies, talking about suicide, how to deal with conflict, knowing where to go when there's a problem. Social emotional learning is big in New Jersey. A lot of schools, such as Patterson Public Schools, we have social emotional learning interventionists and coordinators who go into the schools to help our school counselors and social workers to extend and expand upon these teachings, helping kids to channel their energies and talking in small groups or talking individually or talking as a whole classroom about different character traits, digital citizenship, responsibility. Again, these are characteristics that are necessary in the classroom. And when you're talking about social emotional, how do we project ourselves? How do we showcase our best side so that people can respect us and see us as an authentic being? I have a lot of respect for social emotional learning because, again, this should have been done a long time ago. Okay?
Correct.
And,
I agree.
And I think that we waited a little bit too long to uncover its effects and impact that it can have on the classroom and towards sustaining and developing or sustaining a positive and healthy school climate.
See, again, I agree because, It has been my experience, and it has gotten better. I can honestly say that, or either my assignment got better. I don't know, maybe a combination of both. But in any event, this message of everything is not solved with violence. Everything is not solved with hitting. Now, this is where it kind of gets messy in terms of what we're seeing on a worldwide or a national level in terms of our leaders, even on a local level for that matter, because a lot of times they're seeing, even our city council, that the way to solve things is by violence and fighting. And so we're constantly going against that message. And that's why many people think SEL and restorative practices, they think all that is soft. It is not. It's just like nonviolence was not soft when Dr. King was leading that effort of nonviolence. Was not soft. It is harder to sit there and be spit on and not spit on somebody back or want to beat the daylights out of them. But yet you sit there and take that. Now you think that's soft? I don't think that's soft. Or you think having to sit down and have a conversation with somebody is soft? I don't think that's soft. That's why my teachers would always, we sent him down to Mr. Medley and he didn't do nothing. Many times I would tell the kid, all right, kid, you got a choice. Sermon or the suspension. I can't tell you how many times they take the suspension. They ain't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to hear that. Yeah, you're going to hear it.
But see, it needs to be a philosophical paradigm that is consistent across the board. Everyone has to be on the same page. So school principals should somewhat measure or survey their staff to understand what their approach and ideologies as it relates to discipline, because you have people from various backgrounds that support punitive models who want to see the kids get punished, and then you have those who want to see the kids have second chances.
Yes.
So where do we fit as a school? And it needs to be the same across the board, because that's the mission, that's the philosophy.
See, it's that punitive mindset that always gets me, because the punitive minds, and in most cases, now listen, teachers, I'm not saying this is necessarily you, but in many instances, whenever they want that kid suspended, they just want peace for 3 days. Mm-hmm. Get this kid out of my area, get this kid out of my sight for 3 days in order for...
A quick resolve.
Yes, a quick resolve, and going back to winning the war versus, the battle or whatever. But that, when you start working with restorative and SEL, you're looking long-term. You're looking at long-term gains versus, like you just said, a quick resolve.
Right. But the thing about it is so many schools, they move away from the restorative practices or SEL or PBIS because they're not finding quick, instant change, reform. So anytime you are implementing a program in school, in order to see change, you need to implement it a minimum of 3 years.
That's the low end, yeah.
Right. Yes. So, you're not going to see changes overnight. It takes time.
It takes time. Now, I'll tell you, case in point, we're getting ready to close out in a minute. I'm going to put in Man on the Mirror. We're going to play that as we close out. But I had a child. I walked up in a Chipotle restaurant, and a young man was behind the counter. We looked at each other and recognized each other's face. And he says, "You're a principal. You're Mr. Medley, right?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Don't you remember me?" I look. I said, "Yeah, I remember you were one of my students. Give me your name." He says, now, when he was in school, Mike, he was short and chubby. Now he was tall and thin, but I could still see the facial features. And he says, "I'm Jadir." And I looked, and my mind immediately went back to Jadir. I said, "Yes, I remember you. Yes, now that you said your name, I know exactly who you are." This is what he said to me, though. He said, "I know I was a pain in your behind, but you were fair. There was times you could have suspended me. You didn't."
Right.
He remembered that. Mm-hmm. He's grown now. He's an adult now. But he remembered I did something that he could have suspended me for, and he didn't.
Can I share this last story?
Yes, please.
And it goes back to something that you said much earlier when you said that when you go out, you are always finding parents and teachers. I was able to avoid that because when I like to shop in peace. So I would have a disguise. I had a wig on. I'm a bald man. I had a wig on with some dreads. I would go in Walmart with my dress on, and I walk past my students.
See, he's crazy enough to do that. I told you he matches my level of crazy. He does. He's crazy enough to do that.
I have parents asking me, "How did my child do in a science test?" I don't want to talk about that. I'm trying to shop. I'm trying to get my lobster, scallops, and shrimp. I'm going to show you the picture.
Walmart in a lock wig.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, man.
Man. I want some fish head soup.
I know that's right. But go ahead with the story.
But that's pretty much it, bro. But thank you so much.
I told you we were gonna laugh. When I get with this brother, I have a good time.
We have a good time. I think that this was more tame.
Yeah. But he come to my school, we have a blast. You know, if I come down to central office, he see me in the office.
And it doesn't help that your secretary is on it too. Okay, she adds to the fire too. Can't get nothing accomplished with the two of y'all. And then don't add your school counselors to the mix.
Yes,
we have a good time.
indeed.
But that's what education is about. It's about having a good time because it's very stressful, but you need to have a point of relaxation and fun.
I know that's right. All right, here we go. I'm putting on Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. And that's a wonderful way